At 100 years old, Dick Van Dyke still has the same warm smile and kind spirit that made the world love him. But behind that bright smile are the people who helped shape his life in quiet, powerful ways. Some stood by him during his hardest moments, some inspired his talent, and some touched his heart so deeply that he still carries their memory today. These 6 people were not just part of his career, they were part of his life. They guided him, supported him, and stayed with him long after the camera stopped rolling. Their love, their lessons, and even their losses helped build the man he became. Here are the 6 people Dick Van Dyke will never forget, and when you hear who number 1 is, it will break your heart. Margie Willett. Before the fame, before the lights, before anyone in Hollywood even knew his name, there was Margie Willett. She wasn't a co-star or a producer or a studio executive. She was simply the girl he fell in love with long before he ever dreamed of becoming a legend. Their life started with nothing. They were so broke they couldn't even afford their own wedding, and ended up getting married live on a radio show just to have the ceremony paid for. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And for Dick, that mattered more than anything. Margie was with him through the lean years, the disappointments, the constant auditions, and the long nights when he wondered if he would ever make it. And when success finally arrived, she stepped back, quietly raising their 4 children while the world claimed more and more of her husband's time. But fame comes with shadows, and Dick's growing distance, along with his struggles with alcohol, slowly pulled them apart. He has spoken often about the guilt he carried, the mistakes he made, and the pain he caused her without ever meaning to. Their marriage didn't survive, but the memories did. Even at 100, Margie remains the reminder of who he was before Hollywood, the woman who loved him when he had nothing, and the one he still thinks of with a quiet, unspoken sorrow. Julie Andrews. Julie Andrews wasn't just a co-star. She was a presence, a warmth, a kind of grace that made every room feel gentler the moment she walked in. When Dick first met her on the set of Mary Poppins, he knew instantly that he was standing beside someone extraordinary. She had a voice that felt like it belonged in another world, and a calm confidence that made even chaotic film days feel like magic. For Dick, Julie represented everything beautiful about the craft of performing. She never raised her voice, never demanded attention, never acted bigger than anyone else. Yet somehow, she was always the brightest part of the scene. Working alongside her wasn't work at all. It was joy, the purest kind. And even decades later, he still describes those days as some of the happiest of his career. But what stayed with him wasn't just her talent. It was her kindness. When he struggled with confidence, she reassured him. When he doubted himself, she believed in him. Through the years, through changing eras of Hollywood, their friendship never faded. Julie Andrews is one of the few people Dick describes with nothing but affection. No wounds, no regrets, no hidden scars. Just gratitude. She reminded him that Hollywood could be gentle, that people could be good. At 100 years old, when Dick Van Dyke looks back on the people who shaped his life, Julie remains one of the brightest memories he holds on to, a reminder of grace in a world that often forgot what grace looked like. Stan Laurel. Long before Dick Van Dyke became a household name, he was just a young performer studying every move, every expression, every quiet piece of genius from the man he admired most. Stan Laurel wasn't just a comedy legend. To Dick, he was the blueprint, the inspiration, the person who showed him that humor could be gentle, innocent, and still powerful enough to move the world. As a boy, Dick watched Laurel and Hardy films until the reels wore thin. He memorized the walk, the smile, the tilt of the head, not out of imitation, but out of awe. And years later, when he finally met Stan Laurel in person, something in him felt complete. Laurel welcomed him not like a fan, but like a friend. They talked quietly, laughed often, and shared a love for a style of comedy that felt like it came from a better, simpler time. Dick visited him regularly in his final years, often just to sit with him, listen, and absorb whatever wisdom Laurel offered so effortlessly. And when Stan passed away, it wasn't Hollywood that felt smaller. It was Dick's world. He delivered Laurel's eulogy with a trembling voice, honoring the man who had shaped not only his craft, but his heart. Even now, at 100 years old, Dick still carries Stan's influence inside him, in his timing, in his warmth, and in the quiet belief that making people smile is one of the noblest things a person can do. Stan wasn't simply an idol. He was a guiding light he never stopped following. Mary Tyler Moore. Mary Tyler Moore wasn't just a co-star. She was a spark that changed everything the moment she stepped onto the set of the Dick Van Dyke Show. Before the world knew her name, Dick saw something in her. A rare blend of elegance, wit, and vulnerability that made every scene feel alive. She was young, untested, and stepping into a role that could have overwhelmed almost anyone. But Mary carried herself with a quiet determination that immediately caught Dick's attention. Working with her was effortless. Their timing blended naturally, their chemistry felt organic, and together they created moments that still define television history. Dick often said she made him better, sharper, funnier, more present. She lifted scenes without ever stealing them, and she became the heart of the show in ways no one expected. But behind that laughter, both of them were carrying private battles. Mary struggled silently with her own demons. Alcoholism, the pressure of fame, and personal heartbreaks she kept hidden beneath her radiant smile. Dick understood that pain more than he ever admitted at the time. Their connection wasn't romantic, but it was deeply human. Two performers holding each other steady when the world demanded perfection. When Mary passed away in 2017, Dick said it felt like losing a piece of the past he never wanted to let go of. She wasn't just unforgettable because of her talent. She was unforgettable because she brought light into his life during years when he desperately needed it. Even at 100, the memory of Mary Tyler Moore still rests gently and painfully on his heart. Carl Reiner. If Dick Van Dyke had to choose one person who shaped the course of his life more than anyone else, it would be Carl Reiner. Their connection wasn't built on fame or convenience. It was built on mutual respect, shared humor, and a friendship that grew deeper with every passing decade. When Carl cast Dick in the Dick Van Dyke Show, he didn't just give him a role, he gave him a future. He saw something in that young, lanky performer that even Dick didn't fully see in himself yet. Carl wasn't just a creator or a collaborator. He was a guide, a steady voice when Dick doubted himself, a quiet anchor during the chaotic moments of early fame. And as the years passed, their friendship evolved into something rare in Hollywood. A bond that had nothing to do with the industry and everything to do with genuine human connection. For more than 60 years, they spoke almost every night. Sometimes for hours, sometimes just a few minutes. But always with laughter, always with warmth. It became a ritual, a lifeline, a reminder that no matter how much the world changed, some things never did. When Carl passed away in 2020, Dick said it felt like losing a part of himself. The silence that followed was heavy, unfamiliar. A world without Carl was a world missing its brightest sound, laughter. Even now, at 100 years old, Dick still feels that absence. Everyday Carl wasn't just unforgettable. He was irreplaceable, the friend who walked beside him for a lifetime. Michelle Triola. Among all the people in Dick Van Dyke's long and remarkable life, None left a deeper, more lasting mark than Michelle Triola. She didn't arrive in his early years, or during the height of his fame. She came later, when he was older, worn down by guilt, regret, and a career that had given him so much but taken just as much in return. Michelle was different from the world he lived in. She didn't care about the spotlight, the legacy, or the expectations. She cared about him, the man behind the smile, behind the jokes, behind the history. Their connection wasn't loud or flashy, it was gentle, steady, and healing. For 35 years, she stood beside him, not as an accessory to a Hollywood icon, but as the woman who helped him rediscover pieces of himself he thought were gone forever. She supported him through sobriety, through emotional turbulence, and through the quiet moments when the weight of his past finally caught up to him. And then, in 2009, she was gone. Her death hit him harder than anything he had ever faced. Dick withdrew from the world, disappearing from cameras and interviews, trying to navigate a grief that felt too heavy to carry. He once said that losing her was like losing the ground beneath his feet. Even now, at 100 years old, that wound hasn't fully closed. Michelle wasn't just the love of his later life. She was the safe place his heart never stopped returning to. Of all the people Dick Van Dyke will never forget, Michelle is the one who still breaks him, and the one who still keeps him going. After 100 years of life, Dick Van Dyke knows that the moments that truly shaped him weren't the awards or the applause. They were the people who walked beside him, the ones who lifted him when he struggled, inspired him when he doubted himself, and stayed in his heart long after their time with him passed. Each of these 6 individuals left a mark that time could never remove, guiding him through joy, pain, love, and loss. Looking back now, the story of his life is really the story of the people who helped write it. Who do you think stayed closest to his heart after all these years? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from the golden age of television.